Hey everybody, Nick with Frost CNC, and today I'm really excited to show you this radius cabinet in Mozaik software. Mozaik doesn't currently offer radius fronts like this, and so if you stay till the end, I'm going to show you a super advanced Mozaik trick that allowed me to make this cabinet and really have it be completely parametric as far as the software will allow, and that trick at the end will take it the rest of the way. So let's do it. All right, so before we get started, make sure you subscribe to this channel and like this video. I've got a lot more content planned, so make sure you're following along. And with all of the products that I show off in these videos, they are available on frostcnc.com. So if you want this radius cabinet, go check out frostcnc.com for this Mozaik product and many others. Okay, so basically to start, I've completely wiped the parts to build clean from this particular cabinet, and I actually built this from scratch for my needs. And so you can see if I go to my parts list, it is simply full of added parts as opposed to native cabinet parts. And I did that so that I could ultimately completely control this really custom radius cabinet. So what we can see here is I've got a number of parameters, quite a few here, and I actually built out this cabinet to be pretty much completely parametric outside of the one big trick that we're going to show at the end. So in other words, if my toe recess changes, we should see this model work great. You can see my recess changed here, and I can do a couple other things. I can remove the toe if you're going to use a continuous toe base, or if you wanted to turn this into a wall cabinet, you could simply remove the toe there and change the toe height to 0 and use this as a radius wall cabinet. We can go from full top to a stretcher style top. If you just want a 4-inch stretcher here, controlled by the stretcher width parameter. Ultimately, I can control things like this door style width on my radius door. We can go to something just to show that it works. We'll go back to 2 here. We can control the boring inside the cabinet just like any other cabinet in Mozaik. We can go to 5 holes per shelf. There we go. My doors are sized by the inset reveal parameter and the pair gap parameter. You can see if I change this, we can show that our doors do in fact follow the inset reveal parameter. And we can also show that the pair gap works. And so you can really actually dial in the fit of your doors, just like you would on any other cabinet. Oops. And ultimately, these doors are recreated from custom-made parts. So these are individual styles, left and right. This is top rail on the door, bottom rail on the door. So this is not coming from a door library in Mozaik, because again, it doesn't support radius doors. And so I simply recreated a shaker look door that I would then make into a radius door. But I also made it possible to have a slab door if that was the look that the particular customer wanted. And then ultimately control over whether you have 2 doors, 1 door if this got turned into an upper cabinet, or ultimately no doors, and an open radius cabinet. We can then also control the number of shelves that we've got here. So we can go 2, 1 shelf, and ultimately none. And then we can actually turn them into fixed shelves that follow all the fixed shelf parameters you've set, like fixed shelf dado depth, fixed shelf interior scribe, things of that nature. And you can see it does add a radius rail around the front of the fixed shelf. And so really this model can become almost anything you want it to from a build perspective. And then we've got some control here on the fasteners. We've got 5mm hole specified, which can change. the distance in from the edge here to where your fastener start can change, and then ultimately we can hide all fasteners if you'd like to do your own. Last piece, since these doors are not pulled from a Mozaik library, so if I go back to having a pair of doors, we do have to control our hinging here as well. So let's turn hinges on there, and you can see I've got a wing plate specified. We can go to an inline plate like so. The distance up from the bottom of the door to where the hinge mounting location should be, and then ultimately the ability to turn them off when needed. And if it's a single door, we can decide whether we hinge left or right. So that's the cabinet. It can really turn into kind of whatever you need it to be. So now let's show the big trick on how I got this to work. Now I'll admit this is tough to explain and probably it might be tough to follow, but I'm going to do the best here. So let's take a look at this top rail, and I'm going to go to the parts list and find it. I can see, let's see here, top rail, TR, there we go. Now, if I look at this part, go ahead and go to edit here. And I'm going to go to shape. You can see that the formulas that I've got set up here do in fact give the perfect shape for that radius top rail. You can see here that the thickness of that piece is determined by whatever material you've got set up for frame thickness. But you'll notice that nothing in here so far really determines essentially the width of this rail, and that is the trick. How do we do that? Well, if we go here, you can see I don't have this called frame. I've got this called finished exterior, which is a part type that's not often used, at least in the way that I build cabinetry. And you can see that it's pulling a material called radius top rail. I'm going to go over to the materials list I've got here and show you how I made a material called radius top rail, and how when I typed in the thickness of that material, I actually typed in the thickness that I specified here for the width of that top rail. So let's go take a look. Go to libraries and materials. I'm going to go to board stock here. And if I go down to the bottom, you can see I've essentially got 6 things set up here. And they're really all the radius parts for that cabinet. So you can see here I've got the radius top rail. And I set its thickness to 1.5 inches, right? So it's essentially tricking the software into making that the width of the part as opposed to the thickness of the material. And so I did the same for bottom rail. I did the same for the toe kick. Again, the thickness matches the height that I want. Did it for the door styles. So I know my opening in that cabinet we were working on is 27.5. And so I made this 27.25, so my reveals were right. You can see my door rails have a thickness of 2, and the panels for the door have a thickness of 23.25, which is really the height of the panel. So essentially we're tricking again the software into making those items radiused and a given height by using material thickness to control the height, essentially extruding the item in a way to the height that we want. So then once I made these 6, I made a material template here. We'll go to 3/4 plywood cabinet radius. So I made this template, and you can see I filled some part types with the parts that I made. So F back is now called radius door rail. Toe is radius toe kick, radius top rail, radius bottom rail. And now when I made the parts in my cabinet, I actually called out these part types to then ultimately get these thicknesses so my parts were correct. Now you can see here one other cool thing is I actually made the door panel both out of finished skin and also out of glass. And so what that does for me, if I go back over to my cabinet, go to edit, view here, is ultimately if I go to the parts list, I can control whether this panel is glass or solid. So if I go find door panel 1, I'm going to go ahead and press edit, and you can see it's now glass. If I go to fin skin, you can see now I've got solid doors. I'll do the same thing over here on door panel 2. Thin skin. And there it is. Radius cabinet with no glass. So that's really the big trick, is using materials to ultimately extrude to given heights. And that way you can define the radius with the shape of the item, like you see here. So really, this opens up really any type of radius curved work. We can really get Mozaik to do any of it. If you have a unique radius item or some questions about this particular cabinet, don't hesitate to reach out, frostcnc.com, and we'll see you at the next video.